Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Doug Boynton. In this week's program, a former Hampton Roads sailor accused of espionage went on trial this week. Authorities say he passed classified information to a foreign power.
These espionage cases poses a threat to all of the sailors and service members and civilian employees.
The Virginia Festival of the Arts begins this weekend with a production of Sweeney Todd. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson sat down with the director to talk about bringing the show back to his home in Norfolk. WHRO's Barry Graham works to find out what led to the general being buried in Norfolk 60 years ago this month. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. A former Hampton Roads sailor accused of espionage went on trial Tuesday in San Diego. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh brings us more on this spy game.
Chief Petty Officer Bryce Stephen Pedicini is accused of passing along classified information to a foreign power. Most of the acts listed in the charge sheet happened while Pedicini was assigned to the Navy training schools in Hampton Roads in 2022 and 2023. Gary Barthel is an attorney based in San Diego and an expert in military law.
These espionage cases, and we're seeing an uptick in them recently, poses not only a threat to our national security, but it also poses a threat to all of the sailors and service members and civilian employees who work at installations around the country.
Pedicini faces life in prison. He was taken into custody while stationed in Japan in 2023 and moved to San Diego to face court-martial. He is the third sailor to face charges of selling classified material in the last year. Two other sailors are in federal court in California. They are accused of selling classified material to China. Pedicini's trial is slated to run until April 19. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Virginia Beach city employees and many residents told the city council this week that fire and rescue staff should be allowed to collectively bargain a union contract. WHRO's Ryan Murphy has more from Tuesday night's public hearing.
A few dozen fire and EMS staffers wore bright yellow T-shirts with a union insignia on the back to push City Council to approve a request to allow collective bargaining. They say it would improve safety, hiring, and staff retention. Resident Marie DeCino spoke in support of the firefighters. Her father was a city fireman for 30 years.
They should have a livable wage where they can do their job serving the city like they want to and take care of their family with one job, not three.
Opponents argued allowing city staff to negotiate a contract would cost too much money. Virginia Beach leaders have until the end of May to approve or deny a request for bargaining rights from the firefighters union. They plan to discuss the issue behind closed doors at an upcoming meeting and bring it to a vote in the coming weeks. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Suffolk's real estate tax rate will stay the same, but those pesky bills are still expected to rise in this year's budget. WHRO's Laura Fillion untangles it for us.
Suffolk's tax rate isn't changing from $1.09 per $100 of assessed value, but new assessed property values went up by 5.4%. Residents' real estate tax bills will go up because of the new assessment increase. Water and sewer rates are increasing as well. Suffolk has bulk water contracts with Norfolk and Portsmouth since its surface and groundwater can't sustain the growing population. Suffolk hit 100,000 residents for the first time in 2023. Laura Fillion, WHRO News.
The Virginia Arts Festival begins its season tomorrow with a production of Sweeney Todd, featuring the Virginia Symphony Orchestra and Norfolk native Rob Fisher as the musical director. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson spoke with Fisher about bringing the show home.
And before we talk about your return to Norfolk, I wanted to talk a little bit about your start in Norfolk. Tell me a little bit about how did you get from here to Broadway?
My route was a very roundabout route because when I grew up there near the beach and thought I'd be a marine biologist, and I went to Duke University to be a marine biologist. But all the time growing up, I was involved in music starting at age 6, and went to Bayview Elementary School. And by the time I was in the 5th grade, I was playing the piano for all the school assemblies and everything. I never thought twice about it. I was just, if there was music happening at the school or the church, I was doing it. So I knew I'd always be doing music, but then I went off to Duke to be a marine biologist, but also majored in music. And then I just kept getting music jobs. So I've never worked a botanical day in my life. And eventually I got a master's degree in music at American University in Washington, D.C., where I was also music director of a show at Arena Stage. And that show went to Broadway before I even finished graduate school. And I thought, might as well see what this is like. Not really thinking I was going to move there and have a career there, but that's what happened. So yeah, it started on the beach in Norfolk and ended up in the theater district of New York City.
What was it like coming from Hampton Roads and going to the theater world, and not just small time theater, but big time theater?
I'm glad to not have grown up in the city, and I never really fully adjusted to being a city person. But it is where all the best people want to go to make music, to make theater, to create musicals. It's just it's the magnet that pulls everybody there. And it took me a while to realize that I could work with all the best people. That was maybe coming from Hampton Roads. That may have taken me longer than somebody from New York who had a better idea of what the whole big picture looked like. Turns out I could play with the big kids.
Why Sweeney Todd? I get the sense it's different. It's unique.
Sweeney Todd. When I saw it when it was a new show, I didn't understand the enthusiasm at that time. But I have watched its popularity grow and grow and grow and grow. I think it's a cultural thing. This I could just go on and on making up baloney about, but people like to see scary stuff. People are drawn to the worst things that happen in the news. I believe children should be exposed to fairy tales where bad things happen. It must be necessary for our nervous systems or something to have a good controlled scare. This is gruesome, but gruesome in such an exaggerated way that people get a lot of enjoyment out of it. You know, it's a concert with a symphony orchestra on stage, so we won't be able to get as gruesome as the real production gets, but we'll be suggesting the bad things that happen. It's done in such an artful way. It's never that frightening or disgusting or horrible, but it is like a fairy tale. And it's just like one of the best stories of revenge ever.
The Virginia Arts Festival will present Sweeney Todd April 13th at Chrysler Hall. You can get more information at vafest.org. The performance is sponsored in part by WHRO Public Media. The region's Habitat for Humanity organizations have stopped taking applications for their new home programs. They say the cost of land in Hampton Roads is too expensive. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reported the story.
Janet Green runs the Peninsula and Greater Williamsburg chapter of Habitat for Humanity. Last year, the group got a record 280 applications to its new home program. But for the first time in the group's 39-year history,
we are not able to accept home buyer applications, and that is all due to lack of available and affordable land.
Green says the price of vacant land in the areas that most need affordable housing has tripled or quadrupled over the last couple of years. Habitat for Humanity of Southampton Roads made the same announcement suspending new applications this month. The website for the Habitat chapter in Richmond also says it won't be taking new applications this spring. Green says she's hoping the Peninsula chapter can reopen applications sometime later this year. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
6 tenant rights groups around North Carolina are forming a statewide tenants union. As WFAE's Nick de la Canal reports, the group will focus on helping local efforts to unionize renters and expand tenants' rights around the state.
The North Carolina Tenants Union is a network of 6 local groups from Asheville, Charlotte, New Bern, New Hanover, Raleigh-Durham, and Winston-Salem. Executive Director Nick McLeod says the group will help renters who want to unionize apartment buildings, mobile home parks, or public housing.
So that they can negotiate leases together, and advocate for repairs as needed.
The group will also lobby for stronger tenant legal protections, like capping rent increases, outlawing arbitrary evictions, and requiring landlords to clean up and prevent mold. The union could also provide legal representation to renters in eviction court. More than 1.4 million households in North Carolina rent their homes. That's equal to a third of households in the state. I'm Nick Delacanal.
Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters is the first children's hospital in the country to be certified to provide advanced spinal treatment for kids. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson filed this story.
Accreditation organization DNV Healthcare looked at data provided by the hospital to get a sense of patient care and safety. Director of the Spine Center, Dr. Carl St. Remy, wrote in a press release that accreditation is for accountability and validation for families. CHKD Spine Center specializes in treating conditions like scoliosis and other spinal deformities. Treatments can include surgery and physical therapy, which are both offered at the center. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
A recent federal law makes it easier for veterans exposed to toxic chemicals to get VA health benefits, but it left out those who served in the Panama Canal Zone, even though they say they were exposed to dangerous chemicals too. Carson Frame reports for the American Homefront Project.
Stephen Price joined the Army in the 80s, around the time when the Reagan administration made combating leftist forces in Central America a priority. Price, who trained as a radio operator, remembers the U.S. military's relentless war on mosquitoes and foliage in the region.
Top of the hill, a jet or a helicopter or something flies by, boom, they blow off the top of the hill, literally blow all the grass off, and in the artillery round is the Agent Orange.
Those flattened areas would then serve as landing zones. Price says U.S. authorities also sprayed insecticides to help control the spread of malaria.
They would spray at night to kill the mosquitoes. But when you get up in the morning, you can still smell that scent of kerosene, DDT.
Decades later, Price was diagnosed with chronic B-cell leukemia after he complained of allergies. He says a VA doctor told him that the cancer could only have been caused by toxic exposure. Price immediately thought back to Panama.
Yeah, I knew it right away. There was no other place in my mind where I'd ever been exposed.
A 2022 law called the PACT Act made it easier for most veterans to get care and benefits if they were exposed to toxins. The VA now assumes that veterans who served in Vietnam, the Gulf War, and post 9/11 were exposed. If they get sick with certain conditions, they're covered, as long as they can show proof of service. Last year, as he commemorated the first anniversary of the law, President Biden called the PACT Act one of the most significant laws ever signed to help veterans exposed to toxic materials.
We have many obligations as a nation. We only have one truly sacred obligation, and that's to equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't. 1 year ago today, we met that sacred obligation when I signed, after fighting so damn hard for the PACT Act, to sign it into law.
Panama Canal Zone veterans were not named in the law, but the VA could still choose to pay for their health conditions. It hasn't done that. So instead of getting coverage automatically, Panama Canal Zone veterans have to go through a lengthy process to prove that their health conditions are related to toxic exposure. Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas says his office is aware of many such veterans who have struggled to get their VA claims approved.
It's very frustrating for folks when they keep coming back to the VA and letting them know about these health problems and how they believe it's connected to their service, but still haven't been able to get any relief.
The VA has proposed expanding the list of places where it will assume veterans were exposed to Agent Orange and other herbicides. It would include Canada and India, but not Panama. VA officials say they still need more information from the military about what kinds of herbicides might have been used in Panama. According to the Government Accountability Office, the VA and Department of Defense have had trouble communicating about how and where the military dispersed herbicides around the world. Castro says there are enough reports of exposure from Panama that the VA should follow up now.
Yeah, I think it may be a matter of cost and the fact that they've not gone back and done the research just to verify that. But so much anecdotal evidence by folks who served there has made it clear that there was herbicide used. And, people shouldn't have to fight with the VA to get covered for things like cancer.
The VA is encouraging veterans who think they may have been affected by herbicide use to file claims, and the agency says it will review them on a case-by-case
basis. This is WHRO's Weekly Edition.
I'm Carson Frank.
Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Parts of a musical produced by Virginia Beach native Pharrell Williams will be filmed around coastal Virginia. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson has more.
Early reports about Pharrell's upcoming production only said filming would happen in Richmond, but a press release from Governor Glenn Youngkin's office says work on the untitled project will happen in central and coastal Virginia this spring and summer. The movie is based on Pharrell's childhood in Virginia Beach, set specifically during the summer of 1977. The project will be eligible to receive a Virginia Film Tax Credit or grant. The exact amount will be based on how many Virginians are hired for the movie and other costs incurred during filming in the state. Michelle Hinkerson, WHRO News.
The North Atlantic right whale found dead off the Virginia Beach coast last week was likely hit by a ship, NOAA says. WHRO's Laura Fillion has more.
The whale, first spotted in 1989, suffered catastrophic damage to her spine. NOAA says this kind of blunt force trauma is most consistent with a vessel strike. Vessel strikes are one of the leading causes of death for right whales. The dead whale gave birth to her 6th calf this past winter. The calf hasn't been spotted since February and wasn't with the carcass found this week. NOAA says it doesn't expect the calf to survive for long without the protection and nursing from its mother. Laura Fillion, WHRO News.
Virginia Wesleyan University plans to launch a new Center for Career Development and Neurodiversity this summer. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson reported the story.
Virginia Wesleyan's new center will offer services for on-campus students as well as people participating in the university's workforce development programs. The center will help people in workforce programs with things like resume writing and interpersonal skills. On-campus students can get help making accommodation plans. Center staff will also help manage existing dual enrollment programs that serve students with autism and disabilities. Students will not need to prove they have a diagnosis to receive services. Michelle Hinkerson, WHRO News.
And like Americans nationwide, WHRO employees gathered outside earlier this week to take in the solar eclipse. WHRO's Connor Worley hit the road. Well, no, he took us out to the parking lot.
Hampton Roads had just under 80% coverage during this eclipse. WHRO's finest wanted to congregate outside and enjoy the experience together. CEO Bert Schmidt caught a glimpse just before its peak.
You can't really look around and see much difference, but when you put the glasses on, it kind of looks like science fiction a little bit.
Ken Nishimoto says the sky looks surreal, almost like a painting.
Honestly, I think the coolest thing is the way it changes the shadows when you look at especially with the shadows of leaves on trees, the shadows change.
Another solar eclipse won't come across America until 2044. Connor Worley, WHRO News.
U.S. Army General Douglas MacArthur died 60 years ago this month in Washington, D.C., but surprisingly, his remains lie in Norfolk, despite never living here. WHRO's Barry Graham takes us back 60 years to MacArthur's funeral procession.
It sits in the shadows of a decaying mall, a monument to one of America's most revered and controversial military leaders. And it was 60 years ago that a procession through the streets of downtown Norfolk brought General Douglas MacArthur to his final resting place.
The nation's 6 days of mourning services for General of the Army Douglas MacArthur are concluded with simple rites in Norfolk, Virginia. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Kennedy represent the President. Mrs. MacArthur and her son enter St. Paul's Episcopal Church for the services.
How did General MacArthur come to rest in Norfolk, a Navy town? James Zobel, archivist at the MacArthur Memorial, says he had deep family ties to the city.
His mom was from here. Her family lived across the river, Elizabeth River, right on the south side, where the Berkeley Bridge is. He would come spend his summers here, with his mom, with his dad, and he could remember it.
The general's final resting place was the old City Hall. Then Mayor Fred Duckworth, in a massive redevelopment of downtown Norfolk, had ordered a new civic center built in 1960, and the original structure, which dated to 1850 as a courthouse, sat empty. The decision to create the memorial was seen as an economic boon for the city. However, it was not without controversy, as Norfolk's segregated policies at the time would again rear its head. MacArthur himself, who had a riddled past with the desegregation of the Army, was insistent that the memorial be open to all.
And MacArthur said, no way. He said, if that's, I'm not going to agree to it if this is going to be some kind of segregated place where everybody can't go to. And it was the only place in Norfolk that blacks and whites could both go to, in those early days.
Douglas MacArthur died on April 5, 1964 at Walter Reed Hospital. His body arrived at Norfolk Naval Air Station on April 9th. The procession assembled at 21st and Monticello, where a horse-drawn caisson slowly moved towards downtown. The spectators were 10 deep on the sidewalks. Bill Zimmerman was a veteran from New York who stayed in Norfolk following his Navy stint here. He remembers the procession.
I went down to, I believe it was St. Paul's Boulevard, hordes of people there to witness the procession. It was a horse-drawn carriage with the shoe on backwards. And then there was a limousine. But behind the limousine was the young MacArthur, and this was followed by many notables, again, either in cars or in walking. And it was virtually silent. There were no, as I remember, there were no bands, many flags.
James Obel said it was one of the biggest events ever in the city of Norfolk.
I saw some estimates by police, and they said that there were about 150,000 people downtown just to watch the cortege come from Naval Air Station Norfolk, where it lands on April 9th, to come down to the memorial. And so you've got all these plans in the works that are ready to go because you're going to have so many people, and it really does go off without a hitch. They bring him down on the 9th, and he lays in state there in the memorial from Thursday night, Friday night. And 87,000 people go through. It stayed up, open all night long.
Andrea Yeseleski was 8 at the time. She remembers standing in line with her mother to go into the memorial.
We got to keep going through the streets and hung in there. My parents felt like it was important for me to see this historical moment. To me, it seemed like there are a lot of military officials, important people around, somber, quiet, respectful.
The funeral was held April 11th at St. Paul's Episcopal Church. Afterward, MacArthur was laid to rest in the lasting memorial, and the period of national mourning ended at sunset when a battery at Fort Monroe fired a final 19-gun salute, hailing a not quite official but adopted son of Hampton Roads. For WHRO News, I'm Barry Graham.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Ryan Murphy, Steve Walsh, Catherine Hafner, Laura Fillion, Michelle Hankerson, and Barry Graham. WFAE's Nick de la Canal and Carson Frame with the American Homefront Project, and also Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get your news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.